Some background. I own a small construction company that I built from the ground up over the last decade. Met my wife Sienna about 8 years ago when I was doing volunteer work fixing up a local community center. She was coordinating volunteers and we just clicked. Got married after dating for a year and a half. Things were really good for a long time. I'm not going to pretend we had a perfect marriage or anything. We had our ups and downs like anyone else. Money was tight the first few years while I was getting the business established. I worked long hours, sometimes 6, 7 days a week. She was always supportive, though. Or so I thought. Last Saturday, Sienna was hosting her monthly book club at our house. Usually I make myself scarce when her friends come over. I'll hit the gym or grab beers with my buddy Thomas. But our kitchen faucet had been leaking and I promised I'd fix it that weekend. I figured I could just work on it while they did their thing in the living room. Our kitchen connects to the living room with this half wall, so I could hear everything while I was working on the pipes under the sink. At first it was just the usual stuff. Talking about the book, which none of them actually seemed to have read LOL. Gossiping about people I don't know, complaining about their jobs, normal stuff. Then I heard Sienna's best friend Celeste ask her, "So when are you finally leaving that pathetic excuse for a man?" I literally froze under the sink. Like, what the actual hell? I stayed completely silent, not moving a muscle. Sienna sighed and said she was waiting for the right time, that her dad's lawyer was setting everything up. Then she started talking about how they were going to claim abuse, infidelity, hidden assets. All this completely made-up bullshit. One of her other friends, I think it was Tegan, actually seemed confused and was like, "But he seems so nice." And my wife, laughed and said, "Nice doesn't pay for vacations. Nice doesn't buy designer bags. I married potential. Got a dud." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My hands were shaking. But something in me just went cold and calculating. Instead of jumping out and confronting them, I slowly pulled out my phone and started recording. That's when it got even worse. Her sister, who I've always had a good relationship with, started coaching her on how to fake evidence, telling her to start more fights, to throw things, to try to make me react so they could record it. Sienna bragged about how she was already recording our conversations and even editing the audio to make me sound aggressive. Then her mom called on speaker and asked if she had moved the money yet. Sienna said she was going to transfer $47,000 to her personal account the next day. Our money. Money I worked my ass off for. She literally said, "He never checks the statements." They kept going, planning everything in detail. How she'd get 70% of my business minimum because it's community property. How she'd get the house. How they were going to stage photos with fake bruises using makeup. The whole time I just kept recording. Every single word. My mind was racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. When they finally started talking about the actual book, I quietly put my phone away, finished fixing the faucet, and slipped out the back door. Told Sienna I was going to the hardware store for a part. As soon as I was in my truck, I called my bank and changed all my passwords. Then I called the business account and did the same. Then I called Thomas, who's also my best friend since high school, and told him everything. He let me crash at his place that night. I told Sienna I was working late on an emergency job. The next morning, Sunday, I met with a divorce attorney who was willing to see me on a weekend. Cost me extra, but worth it. I played him the recording and his jaw literally dropped. He told me to act completely normal at home while he got things in order. I spent Sunday moving most of our joint savings to my business account, which is protected since I started it before our marriage, and gathering all my important documents. The lawyer said what I did was legal since I'm moving assets I can prove I earned to accounts in my name, not hiding them. Monday morning, I noticed Sienna acting weird at breakfast. She kept trying to start arguments about stupid stuff. The dishes, a sock on the floor, how I chew too loud. I just stayed calm and didn't engage. She looked frustrated. When I checked our joint account that night, sure enough, she had transferred $47,000 to her personal account, exactly like she said she would. I took screenshots of everything. Tuesday, she called me at work, suddenly all sweet and loving, asking if I'd be home for dinner. Said she was making my favorite, steak and potatoes. When I got home, she had candles lit, was wearing this dress I bought her for our anniversary. It was so weird watching her put on this act, knowing what I knew. During dinner, she casually mentioned that her dad wanted to invest in my business. Said he could help me take it to the next level. I just nodded and said I'd think about it. I knew what she was doing, trying to get her dad's hooks into my company before filing for divorce. Wednesday was when she started getting suspicious. I think she noticed I wasn't checking our mail, where the bank statements come. She asked me if everything was okay because I seemed distant. I told her I was just stressed about a big project. She tried to start another fight about me working too much. I just said I needed to make a call and went outside, called my lawyer again. He said everything was in motion, just needed to hold out a few more days. When I came back inside, Sienna was on the phone with someone, talking quietly. She hung up as soon as she saw me. This morning, I woke up to find her going through my phone while I was in the shower. I caught her red-handed and she threw the phone at me, screaming that I was probably cheating. The irony was almost funny. Almost. So now, I'm sitting at Thomas's place again, typing this out. My lawyer says we'll be ready to file everything by Monday. I've documented all the money transfers, I have the recording. I have screenshots of text messages between Sienna and her sister talking about their plans. I still can't wrap my head around why she's doing this. We built a life together. I thought we were happy. The only thing I can figure is that her family never thought I was good enough. Her dad's some big-shot real estate developer, and I'm just a guy who works with his hands. I guess the potential she saw in me was the potential to become like her dad. And when I was happy just running my small business, I became a dud. I'm not going to let them destroy me. I'm not going to let them take what I've built. And I'm definitely not going to be painted as some kind of monster when I've never laid a hand on her. I'll update when things progress. Right now, I'm just trying to keep my head on straight and not do anything stupid out of anger. But man, I never knew I could feel this kind of rage towards someone I once loved. Update 1. Didn't expect that many people to care about my situation. A lot has happened in the past few days, and honestly, I'm still processing everything. So Friday morning, I woke up at Thomas's place and immediately checked our joint account. Sienna had taken out another $5,000, on top of the $47,000 she'd already transferred. She's not even trying to be subtle anymore. I screenshotted everything and sent it directly to my lawyer. My lawyer, Maxwell, is seriously a beast. When we met on Friday, this was our second meeting, he brought in his colleague who specializes in false abuse claims. They went through my recording about 5 times, taking notes on every single detail. Maxwell kept saying stuff like, "This is gold," and "I've never had a client with this level of evidence before." The way they were reacting made me realize just how screwed I would have been if I hadn't overheard that conversation. I asked Maxwell if I should confront Sienna. He advised against it, saying we should let her dig herself deeper. But then he got this look on his face and asked if I thought she might try to plant evidence in our house. That hadn't even occurred to me, but knowing her family, especially her sister who was coaching her on how to fake evidence, yeah, that seemed likely. So Maxwell suggested I install a security system. That same day, I picked up some cameras from the electronics store. Nothing fancy or hidden, just regular security cameras for the main areas of the house. I made sure they were the kind that upload footage to the cloud, so even if she found them and destroyed them, I'd have the recordings. I went home Friday night acting like everything was normal. Sienna was weirdly nice again. Made dinner, poured wine, asked about my day. It was surreal sitting across from her making small talk, knowing what I knew. When she went to take a shower, I quickly installed one camera in the living room and one in the kitchen. Saturday morning, she said she was going shopping with her mom and sister. As soon as she left, I installed the rest of the cameras. Then I started looking through her stuff. I know that sounds bad, but Maxwell said I needed to know what I was dealing with. In her desk drawer, I found a notebook. You guys, she had a literal checklist titled Divorce Prep, with items like Stage Argument Check and Set Up Recording App Check and Talk to Dad's PI about following Eric Check. She's been having me followed. What the actual hell? I took photos of every page of that notebook. There was even a timeline. She was planning to file for divorce next Friday, a week earlier than I thought. The most disturbing part was a note about meeting with someone named Dylan on Tuesday. It said, "Confirm story about Eric's aggression at the Miller job." Dylan is one of my clients from last year. We had a disagreement about some additional costs, but we worked it out professionally. Now Sienna's trying to spin it into some angry confrontation. She's literally building a case against me using my own clients. When Sienna got home, she was carrying shopping bags from these expensive stores. With our money, I managed to stay calm, but it was getting harder. She tried to start another fight about how I never compliment her anymore. I just said I was tired and had work to catch up on. Sunday morning, I got a call from one of my biggest clients. They were pulling out of our contract for a major renovation. No explanation, just, "We've decided to go in another direction." I've had this client for 3 years. Their projects make up like 20% of my annual income. Later that day, I got a text from Thomas saying he ran into a mutual friend who works at the client's office. Apparently, Sienna's dad had called the owner and said something about me having personal issues that might affect my work. This friend overheard the conversation. Sienna's dad basically implied I was unstable and unreliable. That's when I decided, no more Mr. Nice Guy. I'd been playing defense, but it was time to push back. Monday morning, I went to the bank in person and closed our joint account completely. Transferred my half of what was left to my business account. Left her half in a cashier's check. Then I called every single client I have and personally reassured them about ongoing projects. I also called 3 former clients who had been asking me to take on new projects and accepted their jobs. I went to the office Monday afternoon for another meeting with Maxwell. He had prepared all the divorce papers and said we could file them tomorrow, beating Sienna to the punch by 3 days. He also suggested I document any verbal abuse or aggression from Sienna or her family. When I got home Monday night, Sienna was waiting for me. She asked where I'd been all day. I told her I had meetings. She asked why I hadn't been answering her texts. I said my phone died. Then she asked why our joint account was closed. I'll never forget the look on her face when I said I knew everything. She tried to play dumb at first, asking what I was talking about. I told her I knew about the $47,000 she transferred, knew about her plan to claim abuse, knew about her dad calling my clients. She went from confused to angry in about 2 seconds, started screaming that I was paranoid, that I was making things up. Then she tried a different angle, crying and asking how I could accuse her of such terrible things. I just took out my phone and played part of the recording, the part where she laughed about marrying potential and getting a dud. She lunged for my phone, trying to grab it. I stepped back and she fell against the coffee table. She immediately started screaming that I pushed her. That's when I pointed to the camera I had installed in the corner of the living room. She completely lost it, grabbed a vase and threw it at the wall. Then she slapped me hard across the face. I didn't react, just stood there. She slapped me again, screaming that I was ruining everything. I told her the divorce papers would be filed tomorrow, and I handed her the cashier's check for her half of our joint account. Told her she had 24 hours to get her things and leave my house. The house is in my name. I bought it before we were married and kept it separate from our joint assets on the advice of my dad, who'd been through his own nasty divorce years ago. She called me every name in the book, said I'd regret this, that her dad would destroy me. Then she stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. I thought that might be the end of it for the night. I was wrong. At around midnight, there was a pounding on the door. It was Sienna's dad and her brother. They were both yelling about how I had assaulted Sienna. I refused to open the door, just told them to leave or I'd call the police. They kept pounding and yelling for about 20 minutes before finally leaving. This morning, Tuesday, Maxwell filed the divorce papers. I was at his office when he got a call from the court. Apparently, Sienna had filed for an emergency restraining order against me, claiming I pushed her and had been physically and emotionally abusive throughout our marriage. The hearing is set for Thursday. Maxwell says not to worry. We have the recording, the security footage, and her notebook. But guys, I have to leave my own house until the hearing. I'm back at Thomas's place, typing this from his spare bedroom. I'm not giving up. I'm not backing down. This woman and her family tried to destroy me, tried to take everything I've worked for. They're still trying, but they have no idea who they're dealing with. The gloves are off now, and I'm just getting started. Update 2. Wow, so the last few days have been complete chaos. I don't even know where to start. The restraining order hearing happened yesterday, and let's just say things got way more complicated than I expected. Thursday morning, I woke up at Thomas's place with this knot in my stomach. Hadn't slept more than like 3 hours. Kept having these weird dreams where I was trying to fix pipes that kept breaking. Doesn't take a therapist to figure out what that means, right? I met Maxwell, my lawyer, at his office at 8 a.m. to go over our strategy for the hearing. He seemed weirdly calm, which honestly helped. He had this thick folder of evidence. The audio recording, screenshots of bank transfers, photos of Sienna's divorce prep notebook, and footage from my security cameras showing her throwing the vase and slapping me. I felt prepared, but still nervous as hell. We got to the courthouse around 9:30. The hearing was scheduled for 10. As we were walking in, I spotted Sienna with her lawyer and her dad in the hallway. She was wearing this conservative blue dress I'd never seen before. Hair pulled back, minimal makeup, totally different from her usual style. She had her arm linked with her dad's, looking fragile and scared. Quite the performance. When she saw me, she literally flinched and moved closer to her dad. I almost laughed at how obvious she was being. Her dad glared at me like I was the scum of the earth. The whole act was so fake it was almost funny. Except it wasn't, because this woman was trying to destroy my life. The hearing itself was intense. Sienna's lawyer went first, painting this picture of me as this controlling, abusive husband who snapped when Sienna tried to assert her independence. He showed photos of a bruise on her arm that she claimed happened when I pushed her into the coffee table. He played edited audio clips of arguments we'd had, manipulated to make it sound like I was threatening her. I kept looking at the judge, trying to read her expression. She seemed to be taking it all seriously, which made my stomach drop. But Maxwell just kept taking notes, completely unfazed. When it was our turn, Maxwell started by playing the full, unedited recording from the book club. The one where Sienna and her friends literally planned to fake abuse claims and steal my money. The judge's expression changed completely, from sympathetic to Sienna to shocked and then angry. Sienna's lawyer tried to object, saying the recording was obtained without consent, but Maxwell pointed out that Georgia is a one-party consent state for recordings. And besides, the conversation happened in a common area of my home, where there's no expectation of privacy. Then Maxwell showed the security footage from Monday night, clear as day, showing Sienna throwing the vase and slapping me twice while I just stood there. He also presented the bank records showing Sienna's transfer of $47,000, followed by another $5,000 from our joint account. By this point, Sienna was crying, but I could tell they weren't real tears. Her dad looked like he wanted to kill me. The judge took a 15-minute recess. When she came back, she dismissed the restraining order and actually warned Sienna about filing false reports. She said something about how the court takes domestic violence very seriously, and false claims hurt real victims. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. As we were leaving the courthouse, Sienna's dad approached Maxwell and me in the parking lot. He told Maxwell to control your client, because this wasn't over. Maxwell just smiled and said we had a counterclaim for defamation ready to file if they wanted to continue. Sienna's dad backed off, but the look he gave me, man, if looks could kill. I went back to Thomas's place to grab my stuff, planning to go home now that the restraining order was dismissed. While I was packing, Thomas seemed weirdly quiet. Finally, he said there was something I should know. Apparently, while I was at the hearing, Thomas had run into Celeste's brother at the gym. This guy, Ryan, had always been friendly with me at social events, but we weren't close. Thomas and Ryan got to talking, and Ryan let slip something about Sienna staying at his place the past couple nights. At first, I was just like, okay, she needed somewhere to crash after our fight. But then Thomas showed me Ryan's Instagram. There were these photos from months ago. Ryan and Sienna together at restaurants, hiking, at some concert. The dates on the photos match times when Sienna told me she was at book club or girls' night. She's been having an affair with Celeste's brother for months. It suddenly made sense why Celeste had been pushing Sienna to leave me. She wanted her brother to be with Sienna officially. The whole book club thing was probably just a cover for them to meet up. I was so angry I put my fist through Thomas's drywall. Not proud of that moment. Thomas didn't even get mad, just handed me a beer and said I could fix it later. When I finally got home Thursday night, the house was empty. Sienna had apparently come by while I was at the hearing and taken some of her clothes and personal items. She'd left a mess. Drawers open, things knocked over. But what really got me was discovering she'd taken some of my stuff too. My grandfather's watch, the rare vinyl records I'd been collecting since college, my dad's old toolbox. I called Maxwell immediately. He said to document everything she took that belonged to me. We'd add it to the divorce filing. Friday morning, today, I woke up to an email from my bank. Someone had tried to access my business account overnight. Multiple failed login attempts. The IP address traced back to Sienna's dad's house. They were still trying to get to my money. I forwarded the email to Maxwell and called the bank to add extra security to my accounts. While I was on the phone with the bank, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Dylan, that client Sienna had mentioned in her notebook. He wanted to meet for coffee. I was hesitant, remembering that Sienna had written something about getting Dylan to confirm a story about my aggression, but I figured I should hear what he had to say. We met at this coffee shop downtown. Dylan seemed nervous. He told me Sienna had called him a few days ago, asking if he remembered an incident from last year where I supposedly threatened him during a disagreement about costs. He said she offered him $5,000 to sign an affidavit saying I had a history of angry outbursts with clients. Dylan refused, which is why he wanted to meet, to warn me what Sienna was doing. He showed me the texts she'd sent him. In them, she basically admitted she was trying to build a case against me to get more money in the divorce. Dylan said he'd never signed something like that, especially since our disagreement had been totally professional and resolved amicably. I thanked him and asked if he'd be willing to make a statement for my lawyer. He agreed immediately. As I was driving home from meeting Dylan, I got a call from Maxwell. He'd been doing some digging into Sienna's dad's business dealings. Turns out, the reason her dad was so desperate for Sienna to get a big chunk of my business wasn't just about money or control. It was because his own business is failing. Maxwell has a contact in commercial real estate who told him Sienna's dad's company has been missing payments to contractors and investors for months. There are rumors of shady dealings, possibly even fraud. He's on the verge of bankruptcy, which explains why he was so invested in Sienna's divorce strategy. He needs my money to bail himself out. That explained why Sienna suddenly turned on me after 8 years of marriage. Her dad needed a cash infusion, and I was the closest source. The timing made sense too. Her attitude toward me changed around the same time her dad's business problems started. When I got home, I found Sienna waiting in the driveway. She was sitting in her car, and when she saw me pull up, she got out looking like she'd been crying for real this time. She started with the waterworks, saying she was sorry things had gotten so out of hand, that her dad and Celeste had pushed her into the divorce plan, that she still loved me. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. I asked her directly about Ryan. She denied it at first, then, when I mentioned the Instagram photos, she changed tactics. Said it was just a fling, a mistake, that it didn't mean anything, that she'd end it if I would just drop the divorce. I laughed. Actually, laughed in her face. I told her I knew about her dad's financial problems, knew she was just trying to save her family's ass by taking everything I'd worked for. She got angry then. Said her dad had given me a chance by letting her marry beneath her station, her actual words. And this was how I repaid him? By refusing to help when he needed it. She said her dad had connections all over the state, that he could make sure I never worked again if I didn't cooperate. I told her to tell her dad to bring it on, that I had evidence of him trying to hack my bank accounts, that Maxwell was looking into his business dealings, that if he wanted a war, he'd get one. She called me every name in the book, screaming that I was ungrateful, selfish, that she'd wasted 8 years of her life on me. Then she got in her car and peeled out of the driveway, nearly hitting my truck in the process. I went inside and poured myself a whiskey. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from anger. Pure, focused anger. As I was sitting there, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. It was one of Sienna's dad's business partners, someone I'd met at a couple of family functions over the years but didn't really know. He said he'd heard about the divorce situation from mutual acquaintances and had information I might find useful. Information about how Sienna's dad had been operating his business for years. Apparently, her dad hasn't just been cutting corners recently. He's been running what amounts to a small-scale Ponzi scheme for years, using new investor money to pay returns to older investors, faking project completions, bribing inspectors. And the best part? This business partner has documentation, lots of it. He's willing to share it with me because he's worried about going down with the ship. I told him I'd meet him tomorrow morning. I called Maxwell right after and told him everything. This is no longer just about saving my business or getting a fair divorce settlement. This is about making sure Sienna and her family face consequences for what they've done. Not just to me, but apparently to a lot of other people too. The war is now full scale, and I intend to win it. Final update. Sorry for the delay in updating. The last few weeks have been a lot, like a lot. I've been dealing with everything from court appearances to finding my grandfather's watch pawned at a shop across town. But I promised you guys an update, so here it is. So after my last post, I met with Sienna's dad's business partner, let's call him Mark, at this diner outside of town. I was skeptical at first, honestly thought it might be some kind of setup. But when I got there, Mark looked terrible. Bags under his eyes, hands shaking while holding his coffee cup. Not the confident guy I remembered meeting at family functions. Mark had brought this flash drive with him. Said he'd been collecting evidence for months because he was worried about his own liability. The whole time he was talking, he kept looking over his shoulder. Paranoid as hell. He told me Sienna's dad had been falsifying inspection documents, inflating project costs to investors, and using new investor money to pay returns to older investors. Classic Ponzi scheme stuff, but with real estate development. The documents showed projects that were supposedly completed but actually abandoned halfway through, forged signatures, shell companies, even bribes to local officials. Mark said he'd finally decided to come forward because Sienna's dad had recently tried to put several major losses entirely under Mark's name to protect himself. I thanked him for the info and immediately called Maxwell from the parking lot. He advised me not to keep the flash drive in my possession. Too risky. So I drove straight to his office and handed it over. The whole drive there, I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting Sienna's dad or his goons to be following me. Paranoid? Maybe. But after everything that had happened, I wasn't taking chances. Maxwell had his tech guy make copies of everything while I waited. Then he called in a favor from a friend at the district attorney's office. By that evening, they were reviewing the evidence. Meanwhile, our divorce case was moving forward. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following week. Maxwell was confident. We had solid evidence of Sienna's plot, the recordings, the security footage, everything. But Sienna's new lawyer, apparently she'd fired the first one, was still pushing hard, claiming my business was worth way more than it actually is, and demanding 70% of it. The day before the hearing, I got a text from Sienna asking to meet at our house to talk things through privately. I forwarded it to Maxwell, who told me absolutely not to meet her alone. He suspected she might try to provoke me into doing something that could be used against me in court. Instead, Maxwell suggested we offer a settlement conference with both lawyers present. Sienna agreed, surprisingly. We met at Maxwell's office the next morning. Sienna looked different, more like the woman I married than the cold, calculating person she'd become. She was quiet during most of the meeting, letting her lawyer do the talking. Her lawyer started with ridiculous demands. The house, 70% of my business, alimony, the works. Maxwell calmly laid out our evidence. The recording of the book club, the security footage of Sienna assaulting me, bank records showing her transferring money without my knowledge, and statements from multiple people, including Dylan, about her attempts to fabricate evidence against me. Halfway through Maxwell's presentation, Sienna's lawyer asked for a break and took her into another room. When they came back 20 minutes later, their tone had completely changed. They were suddenly willing to discuss a reasonable settlement. What I didn't know then, but found out later, was that during that break, the DA's office had called Sienna's dad about the evidence Mark had provided. The timing was completely coincidental. Maxwell's friend at the DA's office had moved faster than expected. We ended up settling that day. I kept my business entirely. We split our remaining joint assets 50-50. I kept the house since it was in my name from before the marriage. No alimony either way. Sienna even agreed to return my grandfather's watch and other personal items she'd taken. The next day, the local news reported that Sienna's dad was under investigation for fraud, securities violations, and bribing public officials. His company's assets were frozen. Investors were pulling out left and right. I thought that would be the end of it. But a few days later, Sienna showed up at my door unannounced. She looked terrible, had clearly been crying. She asked if she could come in. Against my better judgment, I let her. She sat at our kitchen table, the same spot where she'd sat for 8 years, looking like a stranger. She asked if I had anything to do with her dad's legal troubles. I told her the truth. I didn't report him, but when evidence fell into my lap, I didn't ignore it either. Then she started crying again, saying her life was falling apart. Her dad might go to jail. Their family's reputation was ruined. They were probably going to lose their house. And Ryan, the guy she'd been cheating with, had broken things off once the money dried up. For a second, just a second, I felt a twinge of sympathy. Then I remembered how she'd laughed with her friends about me being a dud, how she'd planned to falsely accuse me of abuse, how she'd tried to steal everything I'd worked for. I told her that everything happening to her and her family was the result of their choices, not mine. I didn't make her dad run a Ponzi scheme. I didn't make her cheat. I didn't make her try to frame me for abuse. She got angry then, said I'd never understood the pressure she was under from her family, that her dad had pushed her into the divorce plan when his business started failing, that she'd only cheated because I worked too much and didn't give her enough attention. I just laughed and told her to grow up, that adults take responsibility for their actions instead of blaming others. Then, I asked her to leave. She refused at first, begging for another chance, saying she still loved me. When I stayed firm, she switched tactics again, threatening that her dad still had connections who could make my life difficult. I'd had enough. I took out my phone and showed her that I was recording our conversation, just like she'd recorded me. Told her that if she or her family tried anything else, I had more evidence that could make their situation even worse. Then I opened the door and told her to get out. She finally left, slamming the door hard enough to crack the frame. That was 2 weeks ago. I haven't heard from her directly since. Through mutual friends, I've heard her dad is cooperating with authorities, probably trying to get a lighter sentence. Their family home is on the market. Sienna's mom is staying with relatives in Florida. Sienna herself apparently got a job at some boutique downtown, quite a step down from the lifestyle she was used to. As for me, I'm doing okay. Some days are better than others. The business is going well. I actually picked up some new clients who used to work with Sienna's dad's company. My house feels too big sometimes, but I'm thinking about getting a dog. Thomas has been a rock through all of this. Turns out not all my couple friends sided with Sienna either. A few reached out after hearing what really happened, apologizing for believing her initial story about me being abusive. My parents drove down from Ohio when everything blew up. They stayed for a week, helping me sort through the emotional aftermath. My dad kept saying he never trusted Sienna's family, too polished, too concerned with appearances. Wish I'd listened to his instincts. I did something kind of petty last weekend that I'm not super proud of. I drove by the boutique where Sienna works. Didn't go in, just wanted to see it. It's this tiny place in a strip mall. Watched her through the window for a few minutes, folding clothes, helping customers. Her hands, with the manicure she always maintained religiously, handling discount t-shirts. The designer bags she loved so much nowhere to be seen. She looked ordinary. not the glamorous woman who mocked me to her friends. The revenge wasn't seeing her brought low. The revenge was realizing I'm genuinely better off without someone who saw me as nothing but a meal ticket, someone who could share 8 years of my life and still plot to destroy me. The divorce was finalized yesterday, just signed the papers at Maxwell's office. Didn't feel the relief I expected, more like emptiness followed by a weird sense of freedom. On my way home, I stopped at the hardware store and bought supplies to fix the door frame Sienna damaged. As I was checking out, the cashier, this woman about my age, started chatting about the projects I might be working on. Found myself actually smiling for the first time in weeks.